Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
I'm Bob Scarborough.
And we are the FAIRtax guys. There you go.
Right here. This thing's but it's still retracting, still making impressions. Everyone going through this election cycle should have one of these or two. And go to town hall meetings and stand on the street corner during rush hour and go.
Yes. Well, actually, of course, the tax filing season is over. But next spring, when all of the folks are standing out there in their little costumes in front of their tax preparation businesses, you just stand next to them and say, I'm going to put this guy out of business. Here's how you do it.
Happy now that it's tax season?
Yes, I'd like there to be no tax season. And that's exactly what happens with the FAIRtax. There is no tax season because there is no tax filing deadline, because there is no tax filing, and there is no IRS to send your filing to. Now, that sounds really good, don't you think?
Yeah, and then you can, you'd probably pay the only tax you'd probably pay would be when you get an online order for Cheerwine or somehow get Uber to bring you some barbecue. See, I told you all. He's got the Cheerwine ready to
go. Fortunately, I don't have to get Cheerwine online anymore. They got it back in the public stores down here in Florida, so I can go to the grocery store and buy a 12-pack of Cheerwine. All right, let's get into this FAIRtax Power Radio, and as we always do, we will start by seeing what the Congress critters are trying to do to the tax code.
It never ends.
Yeah, that's right. It never ends. As long as the income tax continues to exist, monkeying with it will never end in the Congress. So we need to, that's another reason we need to get rid of the income tax and put it in the FAIRtax. But let's start right off at the top of the list here. And again, let's remind people what we do. You go to congress.gov. You put the words Internal Revenue Code in quotes in the search bar there at the top. Make sure you're looking only at legislation in the current Congress and hit the go button. And as of the date we are recording this, that search brings back 815 hits. And by the time the Congress is over in about a year and a half from now, that'll be up close to 2,000 or over. But starting today, first item on the agenda today is H.R. 5056, to amend the Internal Revenue Code to increase the research tax credit and provide better access to the credit for business startups. I must admit, I'm not sure what the research tax credit is, but I'm sure it's an attempt by the Congress critters to use the tax code to do something other than collect taxes and fund the government.
I guess if you're researching publication 17 for the correct form, maybe there's a tax credit in all the time that you'd have to spend to find out which form you're supposed to look at. Research tax credit.
Oh, yes, to increase the research. And again, we talk about all of the time the unstable nature of the tax code. First, you get this research tax credit. This bill wants to increase it. Somebody else will want to decrease it. Somebody else will want to take it away. You know, so it just never stays the same when you're talking about the income tax code.
Never, ever.
All right. Number 2, H.R. 5036. This is to amend the Internal Revenue Code to increase the exclusion for employer-provided dependent care assistance, including the limitation on dependent care flexible spending arrangements. Got that?
Yeah, start over with where you said, okay, now number 2, and let me
to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to increase the exclusion for employer-provided dependent care assistance, including the limitation on dependent care flexible spending arrangements. This kind of falls under the same category as the first one. You've got this, apparently there's an exclusion for employer-provided dependent care assistance, and this bill wants to increase it. Somebody else will want to decrease it. Somebody else will want to get rid of it. It's another unstable rock in the whole platform that holds up the income tax.
Yeah, and the thing about it is that it's never ending. There's always somebody knocking on Representative Who's Who What's Its door to, please, if you could help me, I will be more than happy to contribute to your PAC or to your reelection campaign, or my cousins might be able to help you out in that regard as well.
Oh, mercy. Okay, number 3, HR 5026. This is to amend the Internal Revenue Code to provide for new markets tax credit investments in rural job zones. Now, I'm not sure I fully understand what that says. Let's read it again. To amend the Internal Revenue Code to provide for new markets tax credit investments in rural job zones. So it looks like the first time they wanted to increase an exclusion or increase a tax credit, this looks like they're trying to introduce a new one.
A business going into an area that's underserved or rural community where the incentive would be to create new jobs, which is a good thing. But why, as you always say, why use a tax code to affect that?
You have to say, well, have we seen a pattern here in these first 3? All of them was research tax credit, then the exclusion for employer-provided dependent care, and now new markets tax credit. They're using the tax code for much different purposes than just funding the government.
Exactly.
Okay, here's a good one. This is the last one for today. HR 4967, to amend the Internal Revenue Code to allow for deductions for the performance of certain services by a taxpayer, and your favorite phrase, for other purposes. Looks like if you perform a certain service and you are a taxpayer, if this bill becomes law, you will get a deduction for doing that. Of course, there's no text in there. These were just introduced in the past day or two, so we don't know exactly what the certain services involved are. But if you perform a certain service, i.e. give an amount of money to a particular political campaign, then we're going to give you a tax deduction. And how cool is that?
I'm telling you, hey, you got to love it. Got to love the American way. Way not.
Oh, merciful. We do that every week just here on the FAIRtax Power Radio. We like to highlight the craziness that is already in the tax code by pointing out some of the craziness that the Congress critters want to put in the tax code, illustrate just how unstable it is. It's constantly changing. You can never, if you're a business, you can't do any long-range planning, because what's a good decision under today's tax code could be a really bad one under next year's tax code. And so we just need to get rid of the entire system and replace it with the fair tax.
Exactly. Makes it simple. It's very efficient. You decide when you're going to pay tax by making a particular purchase.
Yes.
Retail purchase.
There are lots of good reasons to get rid of the income tax and get rid of the IRS. We're going to get into one here in just a second, another article from the Epoch Times that you set up. But I want to make a quick mention of one other thing, and I don't want to dwell on this, because as soon as you mention, a political figure, doesn't matter which side of the aisle they're on, as soon as you mention a political figure, then it suddenly becomes a political discussion, and people already take sides either for you or against you, depending on whether they're for or against the particular person you're talking about. But I wanted to mention what's going on with Hunter Biden. People are watching that. And one of the things that Hunter Biden was charged with and was going to plead to was tax evasion. And it's that reminds me of this recent chairman's report that Steve Hayes wrote that came out and says, well, the DC elites think that the income tax laws don't apply to them. And then, of course, there's the evasion problem we've been talking about here on FAIRtax Power Radio for a long time. Hunter Biden is accused of evading millions of dollars in tax. Why do we have a system that even lets that happen? That's the question. And whether you're for Hunter Biden or against Hunter Biden doesn't make any difference. I'm talking about with tax system that he is accused of, misusing and not following properly. We just need to get rid of that whole system so that doesn't happen. And that's what we're trying to do with the fair tax.
What's the number? It's like 95% reduction in fraud and tax evasion when the fair.
There was one study that indicated that the fair tax would reduce tax evasion, which currently stands at about $1 trillion a year, reduce that by 95%. Now, can you imagine, getting nearly $1 trillion a year more revenue into the federal government without raising the tax rate by just simply collecting what's already owed? You would think the Congress critters would love that. But
about international travelers, and we talk about undocumented workers, et cetera. drug dealers, ladies of the night, etc., who operate in a cash economy, a totally cash economy, end up going to the register to buy stuff. They can still buy things with cash. And now you've doubled or more the number of people that are participating in the revenue collection for the federal government through the FAIRtax. And it's easy, and you decide when you're going to pay and how much. Which is something that we don't talk about a lot on the show, but the FAIRtax, a tax on consumption, will encourage people to save, and that's the biggest help families out in building wealth and passing on to the next generation.
I guarantee that under the FAIRtax, you will never, ever see anybody being charged with evading $1 million worth of the FAIRtax. I'd have to do the math to figure out how much you'd have to spend in order to pay $1 million in FAIRtax, but that's insane. But let's go on to this article that you found. This was another thing. We talked a few weeks here on FAIRtax Power Radio about armed IRS agents showing up at a gun shop and confiscating all of the names and addresses of people who have bought firearms at that particular establishment. And this is round 2 of something similar. This article is not quite as specific, so I'm not sure exactly what kind of business they're talking about, but armed IRS agent showed up at a business down here in Florida and was not doing good. Go ahead.
In tactical gear, not just showed up, they showed up with the full armor, and I guess not like somebody in the Army or something, but
SWAT teams.
Yeah, they show up with tactical gear on them. And Tom Ozimek is the writer of this story in the Epoch Times. I get, stories that come in about the IRS from a lot of places. Well, this one starts out just basically saying that dozens, not one or two, or not just one, with a briefcase and, some information. Dozens of armed IRS agents recently raided a Florida business, with witnesses telling a local news outlet, Fox 29, that they were stunned by the show of force by the tax agency. By the show of force, at least 25 to 30 IRS agents in tactical gear executed a search warrant at a business in Stuart, Florida. This was written on July 20th and updated just about 4 days ago. Said an unnamed witness to Fox 29 that was like a scene from a movie. They had the big gear, tactical gear, because they probably didn't know what they were walking into. Reasonable, I would think, hey, I'm not going to walk into a business I don't know, and what are y'all doing in here? And all of a sudden you're not supposed to be here, son. So an IRS person confirmed to the Epoch Times in an emailed statement that the agents were from the IRS Criminal Investigations Unit, IRS-CI, a division whose agents investigate crimes like fraud and tax evasion, back to what we just talked about a moment ago. The agents who are authorized to carry guns, as their work can be dangerous, were at a location on official business. According to the article, the spokesman added from the Internal Revenue Service, the unnamed witness told the news outlet down there in Stuart that it appeared that the agents were removing evidence from the business in bags and boxes. While
that's crazy. That does not happen under the FAIRtax.
It's all, we just don't have to worry about stories like this. I know a lot of people will be going, man, I'm a journalist that covers finance, government, treasury and IRS business and things like that. Well, now they can start writing about, something else, like business explodes due to the fact that business owners, including small business owners, have an opportunity to shed the weight off of their shoulders for IRS clients. And where's that shoebox that I put, they're looking around, and that I put all my receipts in, for the year. and there are a lot of electronic, solutions for managing the deluge of paperwork that befalls a small businessman. But if you can think about this for a minute, get the IRS off your back, close the bill, put something else in the building, maybe a skating rink or some fun thing to do down at Washington, D.C., and say, okay, well, now I get to go and pay my taxes when I buy something at the store. And sooner I can innovate. I could maybe hire a couple of more people. Maybe I'll be able to pay off my debt a little bit sooner. I can turn to my former tax accountant and say, help me figure out how to run my business more efficiently. So all of a sudden you're to
all right. Well, let me ask you something here real quick. This article is kind of sketchy on details. It doesn't really say what the agents were looking for or even what kind of business it was. But what do you think's going to happen when there are 87,000 more of these guys? I'm not sure that all 87,000 are going to be in the criminal investigations division and carrying guns, but I guarantee that if they hire a bunch more new agents, some of them are going to land there. What's going to happen when there are more of these folks unleashed on American businesses?
Right now, according to a public at the IRS Criminal Investigations Unit, they have about 2,100 agents in that division.
That's 2,100 too many.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, what we talked about, we can show them all the door, and then they can go write a book about their life and times of criminal investigator for the Internal Revenue Service. I mean, the history book. Can you imagine I'm sitting here trying to think, it's just going to really be exciting, a relief to be able to, okay, today I'm not going to spend any money, so my tax for today is zero. Tomorrow, I eat some, vegetables that I grew out of the backyard, and I paid for the seeds back in the spring, so my tax today is zero. And you can, more I think about it, the more I think that the potential for people to begin to save money is just going to explode with the fair tax, with the tax on consumption, getting rid of the internal revenues. Right. 87,000 agents, some in the CI division, some in the customer service area of the Internal Revenue Service. The only agency with the authority to investigate tax crimes. They are the only agency that spends 100% of its time investigating financial crimes. IRS Criminal Investigation Unit ensures its limited resources are allocated to the most egregious financial crimes. So this particular article is saying that, well, how many was it? It was like 25 to 30. That's 25 to 30 out of the 2,100. Of course, that's probably the entire section of Florida. I wonder how many they have in Florida, if they have 25 to 30 that are in Stewart on the day a few weeks.
Stewart is not a major metropolitan area here in Florida, I can tell you that. But the one thing that jumps out at me, 2 words, tax crimes. Why do we have a system under which tax crimes are even possible?
Right, exactly. And I know everybody has to have a job and do things like that. And of course, if you need to get into a U.S. Treasury Department business inside the Internal Revenue Service, I can't imagine that those folks wouldn't want to do something else. Unless they, unless that's where they enjoy being or doing that. And I agree with the current system. You want people to do right and be honest in their dealings. But we know that evil in the world, that does not happen. So under the IRS income tax system, it's a necessary evil. So let's back up for a minute and say, okay, based on what we know about this particular incident that has occurred in Stewart, Florida, imagine that not being there. And how do you get there? Well, you get there through getting rid of the Internal Revenue Service altogether, which happens with the fair tax. The tax on consumption is the Internal Revenue Service. So this whole, pardon me, this whole structure that we're under is gone. And as little time as it would take to switch gears and go to the tax on consumption, go to the fair tax, and psychological part of it, the savings and the psychological part of it are so big for me. Young people today, I believe, will could wake up in a world where their kids would not know, their kids, young people today who are just getting out of college, getting into the workforce, would not know what that whole thing was about with the Internal Revenue Service, the tax, and we cannot sit here and say, I remember back when there was no income tax. But there are probably some people that can tell you stories who knew someone who you could say, hey, I remember there was no income tax. And I think that's a challenge today. We've just said, well, we don't know any other way. This is the way it is, and there's nothing we can do about it. But that's wrong. There is a way. There is something.
Yeah, I tell you what, if you're thinking, well, Florida, is a pretty populous state. There are a lot of folks in Florida. There are a lot of folks in, California and Texas and places like that. So if I live in Montana or Wyoming, I don't have to worry about this because there aren't that many folks out here. According to this article, the IRS CI is looking for hire 360 vacancies for new full-time special agents. Here's the key: spread across all 50 states. So it doesn't matter where you live, there are going to be some of these folks near you.
That's right. And the especially in the Criminal Investigations Unit are eligible for something called the Law Enforcement Availability Pay Adjustment, which was probably introduced through Congress.gov, which gives a 25% increase over the standard Office of Personnel Management pay scale. So there is an incentive for folks to apply and be a part of. And I'm not turning this into a commercial, to help the IRS fill those 360 positions. But that's a challenge.
Let's turn this into a commercial to eliminate those 360 positions, along with the 2,100 other ones that they've already got, along with the 87,000 new ones that are coming, along with God knows how many they've already got. Let's get rid of the entire agency, and you can do that with a fair tax. I see a big smile on your face at that thought.
Man, I'm all for it. For a lot of the reasons that you encourage. Psychological, the whole pressure of dealing with timelines and dates and where did I put that shoebox full of those receipts? All those things go away. And then, as we always like to say, April 15th is that whole tax season. It's not just tax day, now it's a tax season. So you get Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. And now it's time to start finding that shoebox. And
crazy.
Aspect of it from a small business owner like myself, it really, the prospect of me being able to sit down, and I still get a lot of ideas. How can I implement them? What is it going to cost me to implement them? What's the risk? How much time do I actually have in a day to start moving things in a direction that would provide a new or better service? And I think there are a lot of young entrepreneurs that are out there that'll be gunning for this exact type of thing to happen, meaning enacting the fair tax, because they can really taste that challenge and can see a light that has been presented towards the elimination of the income tax and the IRS as something that's going to be beneficial to them.
Absolutely.
In the long run, we'll find that they'll be as big and as fighting like you and everybody else in AFFT and like our dear friend, the late Ron Malero, who is watching from glory to see.
Yes, well, I guarantee there is no income tax where he is.
I guarantee you not. That's where all the gold is, too, on the streets, you know.
Absolutely. All right. We got about 3 minutes left. I want to mention something. Excuse me. I want to mention something that's in the works. We don't have this all entirely planned yet, but we've got some exciting new outreach that FAIRtax Power Radio may be getting into. Now, I will admit to total ignorance of all things Twitter. I have never been on Twitter. I've never known anything about it. I don't have an account there. I've never really been all that enthusiastic about getting on it. But I understand they've got something called Spaces now, which is basically, instead of just a text-based chat that you've had on the internet for a long time, that you can now have actually audio chat. You can get people in a space or a room, if you will, and ask questions, talk back and forth to each other. And there are plans afoot to utilize those spaces, or a space of some kind, for spreading the FAIRtax gospel, and hopefully you and I can be involved in that.
Well, I think the have not to divulge any names or anything just yet, because there may be some people that are on that email that are in the witness protection program. We don't know. We have no idea. But I've been reading and studying, and I appreciated your response on one of the threads of this email. But the idea is okay, you and I are talking like we're talking right now, and there's closed in, and you get to listen to us, but you don't get to you get to yell at us, but we can't hear you. So the idea with the spaces on Twitter, now X, is to allow a moderated conversation across the platform of Twitter, where individuals who would like to come on and talk and advocate or debate or maybe offer a different opinion about the FAIRtax to a moderator or moderators. And I think it's quite exciting. Of course, the next step for X, which is the platform formerly known as Twitter, I guess, is to delve more into open discussion, both orally and visually. So create opportunity, as much so as what you and Ron Malero began many, many years ago, just as an audio platform. And here we are 300 and some change episodes later, in bringing about a more vibrant way to involve a greater number of people in our weekly discussions.
Okay, so it's going to take a while to get all the logistics of this thing figured out. And when we figure out, when we're going to be on and exactly where we're going to be on and how to get there, we will certainly be talking about that more here on FAIRtax Power Radio, and inviting people to not just listen to us every week, but to actually go to these things and talk to us, have an interactive conversation where we could explain the FAIRtax to people who don't understand it and things like that. But I'm afraid that's going to have to wrap up this edition of FAIRtax Power Radio. We're all out of time. Thank you again for watching, listening, and sharing. Until we meet again, I'm Bob Paxton.
Bob Scarborough.
We are the FAIRtax guys, reminding you the FAIRtax is the only truly fair tax, and once you understand it,
you will demand it.
So what do you need from me to get these taxes collected?
Glad you asked, because there is a fair amount of information you need to be aware of.
That's your tax plan?
Oh, no, this is just the revisions for this year's tax plan. What I need from you is you need to keep track of all of your income, as well as any taxes that you've already paid. Also, any gifts that you received or gifts you've given to churches or charities or individuals throughout the entire year. Do you do any side jobs?
Every now and again.
Great, because there's some more information about that right here. Everything you need to know right here. So just simply compile that, send it in to us. Be careful, make sure there's no mistakes. If we do find mistakes, or maybe we can fine you or, throw you in jail. So you might want to be aware of that.
And what do you need from me?
As an individual, nothing. As a business owner, or if you're doing side jobs, yes, you would have to collect taxes on that, but,